Welcome to Feminine Sexual Healing, the leading edge of personal growth and development. I'm your host, Amrita Grace.
I know you're scared to be yourself sometimes. This world can be so blind. But if you take the chance to trust, start to open up.
Hello, and thank you for being with me here today. I'm so happy to have Rahi Chun with me here, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him before we bring him into the conversation. Rahi combines his training and experience as a California state certified somatic sex educator and sexological body worker, a certified TRE provider, which is tension and trauma releasing exercise, neuroaffective touch practitioner, life coach with a Master of Arts in Spiritual Psychology, with certifications in Family Constellations Therapy, De-armoring Arts, Chinate Song and Karsanate Song, and STREAM, which is Scar Tissue Remediation and Management, in his facilitation of somatic sexual wholeness. I took Rahi's fabulous online course last fall with my husband, and I was so glad that I did. His name had been recommended to me by 3 different people over the course of the last few years. So that third time I said, okay, this is a sign. I need to sign up for this course. And it was fantastic. So he's getting ready to run the course again in March 20th is when it starts. And I wanted to bring him on and just discuss this concept of genital de-armoring with him so that you get a sense of what it is, what it means, and what it can do. So the course is called The 3 Keys to Genital De-armoring for Reclaiming and Expanding Pleasure. As I mentioned, his next one begins March 20th. So we'll talk a little bit more about it at the end of the podcast. And I'll also have a valuable coupon code to offer you at that time. So hang with us. Welcome, Rahi.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Amrita. It was a real joy to have both you and Apollo in the course in the last iteration. So it's really great to be able to join you in your podcast. Thank you.
My pleasure. So I'd love to know, what is your definition of de-armoring, of genital de-armoring? This is a big subject.
It is a big subject. It's actually quite common. And so it is a great, to define it. I define genital armor as the unconscious wise guarding response of the body to protect itself from either harm or the threat of harm. And so, extreme examples would be if someone has endured some sort of violation or a breach of boundaries, but it can also form as a result of conditioning and belief systems around one's sexuality. Whether it's religious, that they're going to, burn in hell if they engage in their sexual arousal and pleasure, or even cultural conditioning and shaming around one's body, sexuality, exposing too much skin. So, I really believe that the human body is so wise and it has its own natural intelligence and way to survive. And so armor is simply the unconscious mechanism that the body knows how to protect itself. And it's really in the fascia and tissue. And it results in either a numbing, a desensitization or disconnect, sometimes pain and discomfort in and around the genitalia. So genital de-armoring is simply the process of releasing that armor.
That is so amazing. And what you said about what causes it, I think we all have that.
Yes.
And this is one of the ways I try to educate people. It's like, we all have trauma. And there's this really, especially around this religious piece, there's so much shame around our bodies that we're indoctrinated with from a very young age. Nobody knows any better. Our parents don't know any better. Our teachers don't know any better. So I think that people like you and I are really bringing something revolutionary here.
Yes.
So what other kinds of things bring about armor?
Well, that's a great question, because people assume that, oh, okay, I've never been raped, I've never been a survivor of incest and molestation, but I actually find a lot of my clients who've been in very, loving marriages for decades will have armor form if they've developed a pattern where they're going along with penetration before the body is fully ready, before the tissues are fully engorged, before the body is like a full yes. And, I think we all, we all want things to go well in the bedroom. We all want to, maintain a certain, like emotional, good vibes in the bedroom. And so I think it's more common than people realize that, oh, either my orgasms are kind of becoming more black and white than the color, orgasms that I had, when I was younger, or, my responsiveness or my sensations are not as alive and vibrant as they used to be. So that's a big kind of misassumption, that if you're in a loving relationship or if you haven't been raped, that you're not going to have armor. It's actually pretty common. And then the other big area is medical procedures can be quite invasive. And I'm talking about something as common as colposcopies or IUD insertion removal. I mean, even pap smears. Like if it's kind of being forced onto the body before the body's fully ready. And we all know in doctors' offices, there's kind of a time ticking element, and so that can create armor as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to mention that this isn't necessarily only in female-bodied people, that male-bodied people experience many of these same things. Maybe they feel they're expected to perform and penetrate before they're ready.
Absolutely.
And that can be really difficult thing for the male psyche. And I also want to bring in, this thing about medical procedures. I've had a lot of invasive medical procedures myself. I've had 3 abdominal surgeries. I've got a lot of scarring, my
Mm,
low abdomen and things like that, and I've
mm,
had breast surgery. I've had been through breast cancer. So I've had double mastectomy. And I mean, it's just a lot. It's a
mm-hmm,
lot.
mm-hmm.
You don't really think about the surgeries and the invasive medical procedures, but just the way that the doctors treat us, just run them through as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
But I also want to bring in birth trauma because, boy, we've all got that,
Mm,
right?
mm-hmm. Yeah, birth trauma is, I feel like it's a phenomenon that really goes undetected or unaddressed in our society because all the attention shifts to the newborn as it should, but there is really a lack of proper postpartum care for the mother's body. I mean, what's routine is like that 6-week postpartum checkup where the doctor pretty much says, okay, you can have sex now. But I've had clients where they've had cracked tailbones, they've had, scars that have not healed properly, and that go unaddressed. And so I know in some other cultures, there's a whole kind of fourth trimester, quote unquote, fourth trimester routine. But one, my best friend Jen is a gynecologist, and we're always talking about what happens during the gestation, the pregnancy, and the birthing process if there is sexual trauma that goes unaddressed? Does it get tapped into, and do those wounds get reawakened? Because we know that when a woman is pregnant, there's that sense that I'm not in control of my body, which can be reminiscent of a violation. We know when the crowning of the child is reminiscent of a finger or a penis withdrawing, and so there are all these instances where the body is ripe for being remembering. And a lot of times these memories may be blacked out or blocked out and happen again. And so, we're fascinated with postpartum depression. How much of that is actually unresolved trauma that's reawakened during the birthing process that then goes unaddressed? And it's such a ripe time and such a great opportunity to actually heal it. And yet all the attention again goes to the newborn, as it should, but at the expense of really properly caring for this incredible body that is ripe for healing.
Oh boy, no kidding. And and really what happens then is the trauma then gets passed down to the next generation.
Yeah.
And boy, that's something that's been going on
Oh,
since the beginning of time.
since the beginning of time. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we know how infants are sponges, and we know the
Mhm.
oxytocin release between the mother and the child that happens, that Mother Nature has created for the bonding to happen. But that oxytocin can get paired with trauma that's being touched into again, and that's when that trauma can get passed down, as
Mhm.
you said, generation to generation. I mean, we already know that there's DNA transgenerational trauma that gets passed down anyway. But then during the birthing process itself, yes, it can transfer as well.
Mm. Wow. Wowie, wow.
Yeah.
And not only during the birth process, but just during the raising of the child. I mean, like you said, kids are like sponges.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true the whole time they're growing up until that sensitivity kind of tends to get shut down over time
Mm-hmm.
so they can live in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And, when there's unresolved trauma in the parent or parents, that is going to get communicated on many levels to the child. And it just keeps repeating through the generations. And I think there's more awareness coming up around this now, for which I am really grateful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've all got birth trauma. If nothing else, we've all got birth trauma. It's just the
Yeah.
nature of being born, right?
It's so true. It's so true. I mean, I almost kind of want, I mean, I kind of have a spiritual perspective about trauma. I wonder whether it's kind of, the way that we evolve, like we need kind of a pressure to shine, make that coal into a diamond. But it is true. I mean, we do come into the world with these challenges, and it's up to us, and like your podcast and the work you've been doing for decades, is all about illuminating, so it creates a safe environment for us to actually discuss these issues and become familiar with what we can do about them, about our own bodies.
Hmm. And you mentioned safe environment, and I think this is really a key piece here, because we need a safe environment. We need to feel safe in order to even consider a healing process. And I love what you just said about how we need, like, trauma is a pressure that encourages us to grow, because, like, I don't know who I would be today without the childhood trauma and sexual trauma that I went through that made me into the being that I am now,
Hmm.
and the being that I'm very happy to be now, and to
Yes.
be a contribution and be in service, coming out of that trauma.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's a really great piece to bring in, to remind us that trauma isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a human thing,
Yes, it's a
and it can be a real catalyst for growth.
absolutely. I think what you touch upon is really, really important to underscore, that the environment for healing needs to be an environment of safety. When there is a setting and an environment of unconditional safety, I truly believe the body really knows how to heal itself. We just have to give it the proper tools and the practices and the know-how. But the environment of safety is really, really key. I'm really big on the nervous system and understanding the role of the nervous system. The role the nervous system plays in both healing, but also in sexual responsiveness. And the phrase kiss and make up, it's actually make up and then kiss. Because if you make up
Mm.
first, your nervous system will be downregulated, and your touch receptors will actually be open and safe enough to receive that kiss. So yes, the safety cannot be overemphasized. It's really the key to everything when it comes to sexual healing and genital de-armoring.
It really is. And one of the things I really appreciated about your course is how you brought in the nervous system cycles and regulation and dysregulation. I just see this field of study just exploding into the world right now. And of course, being fairly new, just over the past few decades. What I saw in my own retreats over the last year was more trauma than ever before coming up post-COVID. And I realized I needed more education. So I ended up taking a somatic trauma informed care training last fall, and started learning about the nervous system in a big way for the first time in my life. And it's just such incredible information. And
Mm,
I love that you bring that into your course and into teaching people about the process of de-armoring and about sexual relating and about healing from sexual trauma and
mm.
how important the nervous system is to bring into that process.
Yeah, it's so, I mean, I feel like as a human being, it's just so important to understand your own nervous system. And if you are interested in relationships at all, like for example, understanding that my mother's nervous system is in chronic fight flight. I just had so much more compassion and understanding for her, and I didn't take things personally as I did as a teenager. So, excuse me. I mean, in any relationship, it's really very, very beneficial and helpful to understand where your partner or your friend or your colleague's nervous system is at and how to support a downregulation of it. But when it comes to the body's sexual responsiveness, it affects everything from how the oxytocin flows in the body, to how the oxygenation of the breath sensitizes your tissue sensitivity, to how hypervigilant you are so you can really be in your body to receive pleasure. So I really, yeah, it's such a key. And I'm so grateful that we live in an environment now where there is so much more nervous system awareness that wasn't, I mean, it wasn't around like 20, even 10 years ago. I feel like it's really coming into consciousness within the healing realms in a big way now.
Yay! Yay for
Yes,
that. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
especially on the heels of COVID and all of the trauma that was created through that just piled on top of all the unresolved trauma that was already there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd love to know more about how to resolve and release
Mm.
armoring, and especially genital armoring.
Sure, sure. Yeah, what I didn't realize, I mean, I have a very curious mind. So what I didn't realize until after I created the course was that I've actually curated genital de-armoring from the Taoist perspective, from the tantric perspective, from psychosomatic perspective, because I have a background in psychology, developmental psychology, and from the pleasure perspective. And so there are many different approaches to genital de-armoring. I find that there are certain keys, and as we mentioned, downregulating the nervous system is a huge key because the body has to feel safe and receptive to these new patterns. And then I find a really important key to be empowering the body to attune to what it wants, give voice to what it wants, and actually receive and only receive what it's asking for. It gives the body a sense of agency. And when the body knows that it's in charge of what it's experiencing, it starts to unconsciously let go of those guarding patterns. And then I find genital mapping, which is really understanding the erogenous anatomy of the genitalia, whether it's the male genitalia or the female genitalia, really, really important. So the body can actually give voice to what it is that it wants as regards to touch. So those are like the foundational keys. And then there are specific de-armoring practices um, of softly touching into the tissue and fascia and listening for what it needs to say, and specifically what unintegrated emotions are there for it to release. And I mean, what I get to witness in sessions is remarkable, um, because there's so much that can be held and stored in the genitalia, going all the way back to how we were diaper changed or potty trained or shamed for, smelling, like our poop or whatever it was, much less uh, sexuality boundary violations or even judging and shaming our own bodies. We each have a very different intimate relationship with our own genitalia, and that starts to come into play when we de-armor to recognize what that is. Um, and then in de-armoring, I find that it's really useful to use pleasure as a healing force to de-armor. So, if the G spot, for example, if the G crest has a lot of arousal energy, but the A spot, the anterior fornix, doesn't, you can do these slow, long strokes from one area of pleasure to an area of armor, and it tends to start to soften and break up the armor in that neighboring area.
Wow, that's amazing. And you talked a little bit about getting in touch with what your body's ready for and letting your body speak. I found that to be one of the most challenging aspects. And
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of other people do as well, because we're not trained or taught how to do that
Yes.
ever in our
Yes.
lives as
Mm-hmm.
children or adults.
Yeah.
So it's really quite a relearning and re-education process that goes way beyond setting boundaries, which
Mm-hmm.
which can be more of a mental emotional component, but to really be checking in with our bodies and knowing what we're ready for and not ready for and being able to
Mm-hmm.
speak that takes being all the way in our bodies and
It's
being
so true.
really familiar with and in touch with what's going on in our bodies at all times.
Yeah, it is. If I mean, for a lot of us, it's developing a brand new muscle, depending on how we were raised. And, I have clients who, when they were children, like I think we've all experienced this. You go to a Christmas party and your mom or dad says, go give Uncle George a hug or go give Aunt Mary a kiss. Maybe we hated them, and it's going directly against what our intuition is saying, And I have clients who were forced to take roller coaster rides when they were terrified, and
Mm.
dance with cousins who are way older than that, like really inappropriate stuff. And what
Mm.
starts to happen is, as a child, you feel like you don't have agency over your body. Your body's choices are not yours, and that can develop into patterns into your sexual intimacy behaviors into your adulthood without even realizing, oh wow, do I have a choice here? I mean, it's a re-education to differing degrees, depending on how little and how much agency you had as a child. But it really does thread back to childhood. That's where kind of the age of the self-attunement imprints start.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so much of it does go back to childhood and
Yes.
how we bonded with our caretakers or not.
Right.
And there's a lot there. It doesn't matter how wonderful or happy of a childhood one has.
Mm.
Nobody's perfect, and there are no training manuals for being parents, and people just
Right.
do the best they know how. And
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes, like, my parents were very, very young when I was born,
Mm.
18,
Wow.
and that's ridiculously young,
Totally.
you
Totally.
know.
Yeah, they were kids themselves.
They
Yeah.
were, and then they had another kid a year later, and it's like
Wow.
it was just too much. It was too
Yeah.
much too soon. Yeah, that makes for tough times.
Yeah. And, like not only how much of themselves did they know or not know before being responsible for these human beings, but when it comes to sexuality, like how well did they know their own sexuality at 18, you know? And we all know, when kids come into the picture, the focus becomes the children. And you've probably seen this a lot too, Amrita, is like the empty nest syndrome, where the kids go off to college and then I have so many clients in that age range where they know they don't know, they know there's a lot they don't know. They just don't know what they don't know about their own body and sexuality from a whole adult life of kind of distracting themselves by being parents and not really addressing their own sexual health and wholeness.
Right, right. And you just hit on just the exact word that I want to explore, because we both use the word wholeness extensively in our work. And it's something I have a very strong identity with, sexual wholeness. It's even in the title of my book. And your business is somatic sexual wholeness.
Mm.
And I'd love to just explore a little bit with you what the word wholeness means to you in this context.
Yeah, wholeness to me, like sexuality, like we were created from a sexual act. It's the thing that all human beings have in common. It's the most universal thing we have in common is our sexuality. And so I feel like to not integrate that which is the core of our aliveness and the core of our intimacy is really kind of cutting off a part of ourselves or denying a part of ourselves. So I love the word wholeness because I mean, I think, you know, I think our existence is a interweaving of different aspects, and I think all of it needs to be acknowledged and honored. but especially our sexuality, because it is so core to who we are. And I really believe this, Amrita. I feel like so many health ailments in the world, can be cured with healthy sexuality. I feel like the gun violence in this country is a lot of like men not being connected to their genitalia. I mean, I just think wholeness to me is really incorporating and celebrating and honoring that aspect, all aspects of ourselves, but especially our sexuality.
That's really beautiful, Rahi. I love that. And that's very close to my own definition, which is really that weaving together of all the threads of who we are and knowing ourselves in a deep way. And that doesn't just happen. That's
Hmm.
something that we actually need to attend to excavate the wounded younger parts of ourselves and be able to integrate them into who we are now. Such big, deep work and so important. And I think that's one of the big pieces of wholeness. And I completely agree with you. I never thought of it in terms of men and gun violence, but oh
Mm,
boy,
yeah,
yeah, that gets the subject for a whole nother podcast.
exactly.
Wow, that's a really interesting association. And yeah, I'm with you on
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Whew.
And also sexuality, like I mean, it's really I think it's the energy from which we connect with other human beings. And what I mean is like I'm not talking about polyamory or having sex with other beings. I'm saying that it's that desire for connection, I think can be expressed from, being human and having this other commonality with another human being. And I feel like loneliness is kind of a phenomenon in this country, especially, I mean, in the world, but especially during COVID. And, it affects everything from our health to our self-image to our confidence. And I feel like sexuality, again, is really a healing balm when we respect it and honor it, um, as the real medicine that it is.
Absolutely. And because it's been so driven underground, mostly through the influence of religions over thousands of years,
Thousands.
it's like it's this splintered off piece of us. And and how can we really function as whole beings without it? We can't.
No, no, no. And like I'm reminded of the video that I saw a few weeks ago of your retreat, that your March retreat. And I don't know if you offer this annually, but it's just a circle of women in the safe sanctuary where they get to be themselves and connect as sexual beings with each other. And it was so beautiful. I feel like men need to do that amongst ourselves. I feel like women need to do that amongst themselves. And non-binary people, and whatever your however your sexual life force is expressing itself, like it's so important to come home. It's like a coming home to your body. And that's the image I have of like, the video that I saw of your retreat. It's like women surrounding other women and just like really honoring the body and their sexualities.
Yes,
So healing.
absolutely.
I
Hmm.
feel like that's probably, as indigenous people, we had rituals like that, but I think somehow it got lost, So I think creating those kinds of environments and rituals is very important to reclaim our sexuality.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's been lost. And
Hmm.
I think in some ways it's coming back, but because of the way sexuality has been driven underground, it tends to come back in splintered ways and less than healthy ways. One of pet peeves is just how much sacred sexuality and tantra work there is out there that completely bypasses the healing aspect
Hmm.
or says, "Oh, go straight to pleasure and that's your healing."
Yeah.
It's
Hmm.
not. I,
Hmm.
I mean, you can't bypass the healing.
Hmm.
And so it can tend to actually reactivate wounds. It's too much too soon, too
Hmm.
fast for
Yeah.
people a lot of times, and they don't even really know what they're getting themselves into. And yet it's ridiculously popular.
Yeah, it's ridiculously popular. I think in our society, people are so goal oriented, and the images in media whether it's porn or mainstream media, are very kind of glorified the climax or the orgasm or the result. And I think that's what a lot of people grow up thinking what sex is. And as you said, I mean, I think we've both gone through tantra communities or schools in our, decades ago where it was just about that. I remember going to tantra workshops and retreats where if someone was triggered, they would take that person out of the room so they wouldn't just, like they didn't know how to deal, they didn't have the tools to deal with it. And I'm guessing it's probably happening even today in certain tantra circles. And so really meeting the nervous system where the nervous system feels ready to be met is such a important key to the sexuality of the person feeling safe to unfold,
Yeah.
and blossom at their own pace. That's just so important. Otherwise, as you
Hmm.
pointed out, it just gets re-traumatizing.
Yeah. And that just brings it right back to the nervous system, which is such an important aspect of this. I would love for you to say a little bit about your course, your upcoming course,
Mm,
and I'll give out that incredibly valuable and generous coupon code once you've
mm,
done that. But I'd love for you to say
sure.
a few words about that as we start to wrap up here.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, the course is called The Three Keys to Genital De-armoring for Expanding and Reclaiming Pleasure. Um, you know, I I just I love traveling and I'm very curious. So I've studied genital de-armoring from different disciplines. As I mentioned, the Taoist perspective, the tantric perspective, the psychosomatic, and the pleasure perspectives. And when I was creating this course, I didn't realize that it's kind of a curation of all these different approaches. There are video demos of me de-armoring the male genitalia, the female genitalia, mapping the male genitalia, the female genitalia, as well as showing video demonstrations of people mapping and de-armoring themselves. And it's supported with 9 Zoom calls so that there's time to integrate, ask questions, and to build a community and support each other throughout this process. I love it. I love learning from my students, such as you, Amrita, and I get to meet incredible people doing incredible work like yourself. So yeah, it's starting again on March 20th.
That is fantastic. And it was an incredibly supportive community and even continues to be. And we had a WhatsApp group. And
Yes.
oh my gosh, the incredible knowledge and wisdom that was coming through, people asking really technical questions about specific ailments. I mean, there's a lot of, you have a lot of teachers and healers that are being drawn to work with you
Mm,
to learn this work. And one of the things I appreciated most of all is that the focus is on safety and healing. And there's a sacred component to it as well, because I think that's something that you just naturally bring. And that's something that I very deeply appreciate because that's a big part of my work as well.
mhm.
So I'm really grateful that you're continuing to offer this, sounds like a couple of times a year, and that
Mhm.
it seems to be a growing in popularity because it's really good and people are talking about it. So I just wish you so much success with it.
Thank
Is there
you.
anything else that you would like to add of some words of wisdom as we come to a close here?
Well, just that, we each have a very unique relationship with our own genitalia based on all of the things we shared, childhood conditioning, the examples of our caretakers, experiences as a teenager, and just to invite everyone to consider what your intimate relationship and connection is with your own genitalia. Is there judgment? Is there shaming? Is there embracing? Is there unconditional love and acceptance? Because that really does affect its responsiveness. So just to invite a self-inquiry around how intimate you are with your own genitalia.
Beautiful, beautiful. And as promised, if you would like to join Rahi's course starting March 20th, please use the coupon code with my name, Amrita, Amrita, for $100 off. And I will, of course, put that in the show notes. And so that you will not have to remember it. You can just go to the recording and it'll be there in both the podcast show notes and in the YouTube video notes as well. So Rahi, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today and with the listeners. I so appreciate the person, the man, the being that you are, the educator that you are, and really love what you're bringing to the planet. So thanks again, and many blessings to you.
Thanks so much, Amrita. Right back at you. The
Thank you.
example and the light that you're shining and the lighthouse that you are and leading your students and your clients, to their own bodies, to their own, to their own sexual wholeness is really, really inspiring. And so I love that you are taking all the wisdom that you've learned, from your own journey, and that you are sharing that with like everyone who is fortunate enough to cross your path.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much.
Thank
All
you.
right. Take good care.
Okay, take care.